Warhirrim Wednesday on Fellowship of Fans each week, or maybe bi-weekly. We haven't figured it out yet. We are going to come together and give you the latest and greatest scoops and news around War of the Rohirrim, just like we do with Rings of Power or any and everything Lord of the Rings. On the panel with me today is Hen. How's it going, Hen?
Hi everybody, it's fun to do this finally. It's taken a while for us to get around to this little
We have
project.
been meaning to do some
We have
Rohirrim
been
content.
meaning, for a while, yeah.
And also with us is Nikki.
Maigovanen.
That microphone, boy, let me tell you. And V, how are you?
Hello everyone, sorry for the mic downgrade suddenly.
You know what? I shouldn't have done that. And Strider, best friend Strider, how's it going?
Hey, awesome to be here. Looking forward to this one.
All right. So for those that don't know, we recently put out an article on our website, fellowshipoffans.com, that was the latest news and impressions from the Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim preview. In regards to what was actually shown, there was no trailer, but some work in progress footage and then a montage of completed shots at the end. They had said that there was a really early layout of what looked like the opening sequence, starting from a map fly-through to a sequence with Hera on a horse with some great eagles. Then a talk scene where Hera is talking about the Shield Maidens. We also have about 6 or 7 tweets that we'll go over later, but just knowing kind of like the details of what they saw footage-wise there, I guess we can just kind of give a rundown of like just hearing that a little bit. Does that kind of get you excited, Strider?
Yeah, I'm just very happy to be basically coming back to the Jackson verse we all know and love. So I'm very excited about this. I hope it's going to be really good. And apparently, by what we've heard so far, it will be. So.
And for those who don't know or aren't aware, kind of like where Rings of Power is its own thing, this movie does take place in the same universe as Peter Jackson's movies, 200 plus years before them, but still in the same universe. Nikki, do you know much about the film, or are you aware of like what was shown at the Annecy Film Festival?
I was not. I've read some of the comments and some of what you guys have been saying, but not really because I knew I was going to do something like this. So I wanted to save it and then do it live. Yeah. But we did talk about it pretty early once it was announced that it was going to be made. I'm really excited about the look and feel of it, that it's anime style and drawn instead of live action, which is really cool. So I'm excited to see what they do.
Awesome. V, what do you think so far?
So I've seen all the things in Twitter because I'm one of the Twitter admins and I had a reaction to them. My main comments, I feel like already Strider and Nikki said enough, were on Hera and the naming of the character. In case anyone don't know, I'm Greek. So that was interesting. Yeah. That was interesting to see, especially when knowing that Tolkien is more inspired by the Nordic mythology and doesn't have a lot of elements of Greek mythology in him. So, and I don't think there was in the universe previously anyone directly named after any mythology from like the known ones that we have. So it's a bit weird to see that name and that choice of name. And I don't know if it will play a role, if it will have symbolism behind it, because we've seen a lot of symbolism behind names. So I'm more excited to see about that and how they will use that name.
And Strider, what are your thoughts so far?
Strider or Hen?
Strider, not Hen.
All right. Well, regarding the name, it is very interesting. Yeah, that was the first thing that caught my ear was like, why is she called Hera? That's very, very unusual. But actually, it's an interesting comparison because in Rings of Power, we have Theo, which is also basically religious or faith-inspired name. So yeah, I'm wondering where this is going, but it's definitely a very interesting choice of a female name, Hera. So I'm also very excited to I'm very curious to hear hopefully how they got to that.
It has an accent on the E, so I think it does mean something in Old English. So they didn't derive it from Greek, but it is the same as it happens. But yeah.
Well, I was raised in New Jersey, so if I'm not pronouncing it properly, that's why.
It is though. You know why it's Hera though?
Mm-mm.
They all of Hel, like it's
That's what he
Helm,
wrote.
and then his children are, I think, Haleth and Hama.
Yeah, the H.
Boys. And so they started coming up with names, and I think Philippa was like, "Nope, the name of the girl's got to start with an H as well. Like you don't like it's too much, like they're all with H, so it's got to start with an H as well. Sorry, guys." And
but I have to add,
Fran Walsh came up with that name actually.
I have to just add something for people who may be worried about them adding characters and so on. It is said that Helm did have a daughter.
Yeah.
She was just unnamed.
Yes.
So so she's not completely made up for it. They just created a name for her.
And she's very sort of in a way very important to the plot as outlined by Tolkien, because she's about to get married to Wolf, and then Helm basically it's a political marriage, and then Helm sabotages it, and that's sort of the beginning of the whole tragedy, really. And so she is very important to the plot in that way. So it makes sense to take that role and make something more out of it.
Well, before we get into the tweets and then find out if the excitement level goes up or down from there, let's just do a rundown. We'll start with Hen. Hen, are you an avid anime watcher? And
not at all.
Would you be interested in watching this in the movie theater when it comes out?
Absolutely, but not as a fan of anime, which I don't watch particularly.
Strictly because this is Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, because it's Lord of the Rings, and because I do think, having read about it, there are stuff about it that are, I think, quite promising.
Don't you feel like maybe the medium lends itself well to this story? Like Helm Hammerhand, the idea of punching a dude one time and killing him sounds crazy in live action, but in anime, we already have One Punch Man, where it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I think that's possible. Yes, that some of the beats in the story, the fact that Helm kills people on the battlefield with his bare hands, would play more credibly in animation than they would be in live action, perhaps. It's the sort of thing that you don't know what they're going to do to it in the adaptation of it, but yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Nikki, what about you? Are you an anime fan in general, and are you interested even before this, watching it in the movies?
Oh, absolutely. I work in animation, not anime, but I've worked in animation for quite a while. And I'm a big fan. I've been watching ever since Pokemon and Sailor Moon when I was a kid. I've been watching Naruto, One Piece, all of these. And I find what is amazing about any kind of cartoon, drawn, animated medium is that you have more freedom to create more magical stuff. And at a lower budget than CGI, maybe, because it's shown, but at the same time, the attention to detail usually when it's anime is usually pretty awesome. And for the Lord of the Rings, I think they have, that's a lot to play with, and I'm excited about seeing the design of the characters and the feel of them, and they can make it really dark without it feeling like unpleasant in a way, without it turning into some form of horror. It can become really dark and gritty and heavy. And I think it's going to work really well. Yeah, because the story is dark. So I'm excited about it. Yeah.
And V, you strike me as an anime fan. Please don't let me down.
I will. I'm really sorry about that. Like, I watch, but not like religiously. I've watched a couple, but not anime with the sense of like Japanese animation and stuff. I mostly like either watch as a child, or now I think the most recent animation I've watched was The Legend of Vox Machina. But
phenomenal.
Like Yeah, it was really great. It got me into D&D, actually, so it was nice. But I'm more worried if the theaters will bring it for more than a week where I live. So I don't know if I will be watching in the theaters or not, because that's
I know that
all
it is releasing in Europe, actually earlier than it is in the US. But yeah, we don't know how wide the release is. That's a good point.
Yeah, I'm really like curious about that one, because I'm not in the capital of Greece, so it's always a problem. Like it's still a big city. We have 2 or 3 cinemas, but it's always like we don't get all the movies all the time. So
this will probably be something you've got to go see day one when it's out, or the first couple days. Otherwise, it might not be there.
Yeah, I don't think it will be a long time. If it will be a week.
I think it's going to dominate so much at the box office that this is going to play for like however long Top Gun went. This is going to do that as well.
I have to say, though, this is true to a point that Nikki made. This is a very dark and ultimately tragic story, and tragedies have proven to not be as rewatchable as comedies. You know?
Yeah, and also with animation, with this kind of anime, I haven't really seen that many of them in the theaters. Like even Studio Ghibli, like I've seen some, but I haven't seen that many. And they're not that, sad to say, but they're not that like an audience drawer, I would say. So at least not in Norway. Like I think the amount of animation films that I've seen that have really been popular and run for a long time in the theaters here, I can count them on one hand. So that's really sad, but I'm hoping I get to see it in the theaters because it's going to be more epic. And then when it starts streaming, I'll be watching it over and over again.
Well, before we get to Strider, who I know, because we talked about anime, before we get to him, I will just say, to counter that point and maybe raise some spirits and some hopes, recently, just a couple years ago, Demon Slayer came out, and they had Mugen Train was the name of the movie, and it did bonkers numbers in theater, like $450 million worldwide. And that story is one of a little bit of happiness, but it's also very tragic towards the end as well. And if you haven't had a chance to see that, especially in theater, too late to check it out in theater now, but I'm sure it's on Netflix with the regular Demon Slayer stuff. But it's I'm hoping that it will reach that kind of success where this could maybe spawn off into Warner's wanting to do more animated films. But I digress. Best friend Strider, you were going to see this day one when it came out anyway, right?
Oh yeah, I'm there. I'm going to be camping in front of the theater, no doubt about that. I mean, as a kid, I don't know if I can say I'm like an avid anime watcher, but I definitely watched a few. I mean, I grew up on Dragon Ball. That was great. Digimon, I love those.
That.
I love those. Yu-Gi-Oh as well. So I don't know if it's not exactly anime, but it's still an anime TV show like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And now recently we had, as we said, Legend of Vox Machina, which was fantastic because I love D&D, and also just the series was just great overall. So I'm very excited to see this. I think you all made really good points before. Some of the things that will be happening in this story, it's maybe better to see them in an animated movie than in an actual live action movie, because especially with the way Peter Jackson, especially in the Lord of the Rings trilogy where we saw Rohan before, it was very grounded. Even though we had fantasy elements, it was very, very, very grounded. It's very realistic, especially the whole everything regarding Rohan. So this way we get to not really break away from that, but still get this new sense of this new Rohirrim story. So I'm very excited about this. I'll be definitely watching this as soon as I possibly can.
I also think it's easier to make it more violent this way, because much of the reports from Annecy was that it's pretty violent, and that's always good. So I mean, in these kinds of films, I feel it's always good. So in live action, there may have been more of a push to keep it in a PG-13, whereas here.
Have you seen like there's this I think it's called Afro Samurai.
Yes,
It's really dark, and that would not have worked at all live action. I think it would be
it would have looked
too heavy
ridiculous.
for people. Yeah.
I think it would look
So-
like Kill Bill or something probably, and that is just like
Yeah.
that's a very specific type
And
of a movie.
And yeah, that's the other point. Just as talking about it, I remembered. I'm not sure that this particular subject for a movie would have been greenlit as live action, because it's so like I was a little bit surprised when they announced it, because like okay, like that's a peculiar thing to choose from the appendices, because it's so like contained and kind of small, and like it's not as a simple exercise. It has no hobbits, no dwarves, no elves. Maybe
wizards.
but it does, because it has Sauron.
Actually, yeah, but he doesn't play a major role in this one.
We'll see.
So
We'll see.
So a
Yeah,
cursory
we'll
roll
see.
for Saruman, a cursory roll for orcs. Somehow they put that in there a little bit, just a little bit. But really, it's mostly just people, you know. And the
Yeah.
ring, it has nothing to do, or seemingly nothing to do with the ring or with Sauron at all, which is also completely unique. So all of those elements, which make it very novel in a way.
Kind of makes me think of like anime version of The Last Kingdom that has recently come out, where you don't have those high fantasy elements to it. It's just more grounded or more based in reality than a lot of newer like fantasy type shows that have come out.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read 2 tweets at a time, and then we'll open the floor up and kind of just go over them and share thoughts on. These are the initial reactions for folks who were at the Annecy Film Festival and got to see this footage for the first time. And these were just a couple of the ones we found on Twitter, and then one that reached our DMs. But the first one, which comes from CloneWeb on Twitter, they wrote, "I dry my wet eyes. I clean all these pages of notes, and I tell you, well, the War of the Rohirrim is in very good hands. This is beautiful 2D from the new drawings by John Howe and Alan Lee. It's full Rohan and the story, or Rohan, based on 3 paragraphs, and it's led by a young woman, Hera, the daughter of Helm Hammerhand." And Ryan Grobins wrote, "Just finished the work in progress talk for the new Lord of the Rings film, The War of the Rohirrim, and I have to say that the marriage between the Lord of the Rings and anime has never looked so good. The world and the characters looked very authentic. I can't wait to see this in theaters next year." So right off the bat, we got 2 very, very promising reviews from people who have seen it. And again, you have to keep in mind, this was not full footage. This was clips, a montage, but it's more than any of us have seen. And I had already gone into this with high hopes. And then as I start scrolling through Twitter and finding people who have seen it, it's hard not to get more and more excited, especially because anime, just being what it is, can turn people away. 2D art versus, the 3D more modern can also turn people away. But it seems like, at least through the first couple of tweets here, this seems to have been a pretty big hit with the audience and the people who are going here are typically not just casual anime fans. They are people who are very hyped up for anime, and they judge and critique it very hard. So this is very promising to me. Nikki, can we start with you? Does this increase the hype for you, or is this kind of expected?
Honestly, based on knowing the Tolkien community, I was quietly concerned, I guess, about whether this one was also going to face a lot of anger and backlash and people being upset about anything being made that wasn't Peter Jackson. But I'm not surprised about that coming from the anime community, because they are, they're a good bunch, and it's a good thing when they have lots of good things to say about what they've seen, because it's very promising. As you say, they're really picky. They know their craft. They love the stuff, and if you love anime, you love anime. So it's very promising that way.
And that first tweet specifically references the art being done by John Howe and Alan Lee, and the fact that it feels like they've done a good job taking their stuff and putting that to paper.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I like that.
I like the idea of that. It's going to be interesting to see how they incorporate that, because they don't exactly, I've never seen them draw anime before. So I'm pretty excited to see how they put those two together and work their magic.
And do you feel like the fact that it seems like they're being faithful to Hao and Lee's work in particular, that this matters more, or does it really not matter because it's anime?
No, I think it does. I think that's the thing that caught my eye the most out of those early tweets, which is that if this, it's not really gonna look like, but I mean, if it looks like an Ellen Lee or John Howe watercolor in animated in 24 frames per second, that'd be awesome. Like or it won't really look like that, but if it's kind of like in the spirit of the kind of atmosphere that is in a John Howe or certainly an Ellen Lee illustration, that'd be amazing. I mean,
Yeah, they have a tendency to draw the drawings a little dark as well. Like, they're not cute. They're not like
they're not the
fairies and
brothers
pretty.
Hildebrand, yeah.
No, and that will affect the anime. And anime can go either way. They can be super cute, like Dragon Ball Z or Sailor Moon, or they can be dark and gritty and heavy, but still anime. And I like that for Lord of the Rings, or Lord of the Rings. I like that for Tolkien, for Warhirrim, War of Rohirrim. Yes, I like
Which is
that.
it is marketed though as the Lord of the Rings, the War of the Rohirrim. So
Yeah.
Well, if you've got access to that name, you're not gonna.
You're gonna slap it
I
there.
agree. Yeah. I agree.
We've discussed this so many times. Like, why not capitalize on something that's already so well known and so popular?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
I mean, if they didn't have that name on there, we probably wouldn't have talked about it as much as we had until we saw, more footage of it. Before we get to the other two panelists, I'm going to read two more tweets, and these ones are a little bit more mixed. The first one is from Mateo Sapin on Twitter, who wrote, "I saw the first images of the Japanese anime The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. To be honest, not particularly convinced for the moment. I was hoping for something else, but we find the style of PJ's films and the set seems successful." And the second one says, "Almost no doubt about the substance, spearheaded by Philippa Boyens with concept art by John Howe and Alan Lee, input from Weta and Peter Jackson / Fran Walsh from afar. Remains to be convinced on the form. The extremely rough extracts does not allow to decide." And I think that was like a translated tweet that we had, but this seems a little bit more
It was in France.
mixed.
It was in France, yeah, the thing.
Strider, let's start with you now, having 4 full tweets to kind of listen to. Do you think this is more of they're just not really, the art style's not for them, or is this something that we really should be a little bit concerned about?
Well, I think it's smart to be cautiously optimistic. That's the state of mind I worked really hard on having before Rings of Power premiered. Just when you're into something so much, which we all here are into the world of Tolkien, it's smart to temper your expectations and lower it, and then better to be surprised positively than the other way around, to be disappointed. So I think that's definitely important, and especially when you're going to see something new, especially for the neutral viewers, I think it will be a very good idea to try to like predict or to try to prepare themselves for what they're going to see. If they're not into anime, they need to be like, okay, this is going to be something very new. I need to expect something that's going to look strange to me, perhaps.
Yeah.
Because if I know people who watched The Lord of the Rings, or they tried to watch it and then they fell asleep. I was like, okay, tell me, what did you do? And they were like, yeah, so it was Sunday, we had a massive family lunch, and then we put on The Lord of the Rings extended edition for the first time ever, and nobody had seen it before. You're going to fall asleep, especially if you're not a fantasy fan. It's not something that's going to keep you, so you have to be prepared kind of properly before you try to see something new. So I'm hoping that this is the case of that. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but it could be that it's just not something that vibes with them. But yeah.
This is going to be a fairly long film as well. I think it came in at like 2 hours and 10 minutes
Yes,
long
but yes, but we don't
per
know.
the website.
Like, I mean, there's still a lot of work on it, so who knows how much shorter it will become? Whether that runtime includes credits as of yet, like, it's. But yeah, we have a kind of ballpark. It's basically a 2-hour movie, which is fairly long for animation.
For sure.
I mean, it's the length of the Bakshi film,
Hearing some of the more, not negative per se, but just more cautious tweets. Are you now only going to see it on the second night, or are you still going first night?
Who is being asked?
Oh, I was asking for V.
Okay, I didn't understand. So as I said earlier, I don't know how many nights option I will have, so it will depend on that. But I'm on Twitter and I have desensitized myself in hate comments, so I'm very used to that kind. And actually, I saw more hateful comments than the one you read. Like, those are nothing. Like, I saw people saying, okay, it's good that we have PJ Styles, but why they have to have a female lead when she wasn't there, and yada yada. A classic, like, respect for talking folks. I'm still a bit cautious because I'm running with a thing like we need to get away from just PJ Lord of the Rings style. So I don't understand if the person that said about how it looked, if he thought it was too PJ or it should be less or it should be something different. So I'm not sure, because I saw both sides on Twitter, like people saying it should stick to PJ style and people saying it should get completely away from it. And I would love to see fresh like visuals, like art, different options, but having something like PJ or the drawings of like being based to John Howe and Alan Lee would definitely mean that it will be quality art. So we will have to wait and see.
My position on the fresh version versus not fresh version is very simple, which is that at the moment, the only other major screen adaptation is The Rings of Power, and even that is kind of there's a term for that, spiritual prequel. Like if you saw The Great and Powerful Oz, it was doing the exact same thing. There are other stuff that do the same thing, like adaptations of prequels to Psycho are doing that, where it's kind of looks this. So if we're gonna go back to that, I would prefer something that can go all the way there rather than something that goes part of the way there. You know what I'm saying? So if it's going to be PJ-like, then I'd prefer to be the actual thing rather than, just an adjacent. So in that way, the fact that it does look like that, to me is reassuring because, like it falls hard on one side rather than somewhere like in the middle.
Yeah, and my stance on this one in particular is, as far as I know, there's no dwarves in it, so I don't care what style they choose.
Yeah, it is. Like I said, it's weird. Like it's so like it's so
just
focused in a
humans.
way. Yeah, almost just humans. Very, very like refreshing in that way. I mean, it's nice that not every Middle Earth project has to go through a rundown of okay, we need elves, dwarves, men, hobbits, wizards, orcs, probably undead or something as well, because that's that's the formula. So it's nice to have something that breaks away from that a little bit.
I'm okay with a little studio interference if we're going to sneak some dwarves in there. The other ones can stay put, whatever. Even if they're just like in the background somewhere.
Elves, please.
Yes, there is something here though. The Dunlandings, the dwarves, shortly after the events of this film, actually, go and live in Dunland for a while. So we won't see them, but I like the idea of getting, a kind of a mental image of where they were living when they were in exile from Erebor. I like that. So there's that going into it for me.
Well, maybe that'll be like the Marvel-esque post-credit scene. The credits run, and then we see the dwarves living it up. in that. We have one more to go over, but this one is a
Can
little
I-
bit more specific.
Can I just interject just for a second?
Interject all day, bro.
In regards to the dwarves, just to give like a little sparkle of a hope for a post credit scene or something like that. Another one is that, I mean, we will be spending probably some time in Helm's Deep in this one. Yeah, like it's going to be basically the main. I would assume it's going to be the main location, the central location of the film. And what else is in the valley where Helm's Deep is? It's the caves of Aglarond, which a certain dwarf during the War of the Ring becomes very, very amazed with. So maybe, just maybe, because he also Gimli obviously, and he also brings a colony of dwarves after the War of the Ring. So maybe there's a hint of something like that, perhaps.
I'm sure everybody's like me, and they just got goosebumps. They gotta put it in there now. They have a lot of time until April to add this in.
And Helm himself, I always thought of as a rather dwarvish man, you know.
Fair enough. He's very tall, but he does have like a dwarven vibe somehow. Yeah, like a
temper, yeah. And also the fact that Brian Cox plays him, who is like, you know, like if I had to have someone other than Peter Mullen play Durin, it would be Brian Cox. I mean, like, you know, like
Just squint a little, and you can pretend he's a dwarf walking.
I mean,
I
he
think
has
that's what I'm
long
gonna have.
yeah. Honestly, yeah. He'll be like he will be looking very dwarven like.
He has a long beard and he has the hammer. I mean,
yeah. Helm Hammerhand. That's a dwarven name there, right there. Helm Hammerhand.
And he goes to the mountains.
Yeah, right. It all adds up. These are the kind of simple solutions we need more of in this world. We have one final message to look at, and this one has a specific that they kind of give us, where they wrote that they were at the Annecy conference, and visually it looks a lot like Vinland Saga and other Japanese anime, that are produced by Netflix. But they went on to say, so it doesn't look very good. I'm really disappointed, but I hope they'll still manage to make something good. And as somebody who watched and loved Vinland Saga, I don't know what you're being negative about, sir. It's phenomenal, and it's kind of pretty.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you haven't watched it, please check it out, because it was that, and I think I saw somebody reference Castlevania on Netflix in terms of how both of those are really, really good.
If it looks like Castlevania, that's good.
Yeah.
Castlevania was really good.
This is one of those comments where it's maybe just different strokes for different folks.
Yeah,
can't please everyone.
Sounds like it. Yeah,
I think so.
It's always going to be someone who's unhappy. Can I just say I'm really excited about Brian Cox and
oh yeah, that's incredible.
Miranda
Otto. That's really cool
Miranda
too,
Otto.
yes.
Voicing. I'm terrible with names. I should remember that, but I do not. I'm just excited about them doing voicing, and I'm excited to see who else is in it to voice, because voices, when it comes to voice acting, is so important, and just feeling the characters. I'm a little bit nervous about whether they're gonna dub it to other languages, and because I feel like that doesn't always work, but it works better in anime than it does in live action. So, because you usually pick, instead of picking like big actor names that have never voiced the thing in their lives, they usually go for someone with a little bit of experience. So it's a different kind of acting. It's like you have to use your whole body, you have to like make up new voices, you have to it's not just standing up and down and feeling the words you're saying. You have to actually live them to get it to show on screen. And I'm excited.
And I believe Brian Cox did an audiobook of Tolkien's Sigurd and Gudrun.
Yeah.
So, you know.
He's got a beautiful voice.
Yeah. I was amazed. I remember when they announced that. And actually, if I remember correctly, 2 months before that, we were talking about who do we imagine would be cast as Helm Hammerhand. I actually suggested Patrick Stewart, but Lakitia said, gee, maybe it will be somebody like Brian Cox. And then 2 months afterwards, I could scarcely believe it when I saw it. I think I almost fell out of my seat. So that was very prescient, yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Lakitia if you're watching this.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I say that we have also, like, I remember on Twitter posting that we posted about who will voice Hera. It was reported it will be by Gaia Wise, so we can add that to the convo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's the. By the way, she's the daughter of what's her face?
Emma Thompson
Emma
and Greg
Thompson.
Wise.
That's
I
that's
opened
right.
like Wikipedia, Google Cat.
Yeah,
I was going to call you Wikipedia.
Yeah.
yeah, she's the
No,
daughter of Emma
I
Thompson.
think it's the Google.
Wikipedia.
Like,
Wikipedia,
Philippa
yes.
had a lot of very nice things to say about Gaia Wise's work on this. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot of very talented folks attached to this project. And for those who have joined this week's video, we're going to let you know now that that's probably going to be the topic of next week's video, going over all the people who are attached voice acting, all the people who are
Behind.
working behind the scenes doing art, hiring, show running this, like producing it, all that. That's going to be what we talk about next week. But I'd also like to say there's a lot of time between now and when the movie comes out. And everybody on this panel, outside of me, I believe can speak a second language. So Warner Brothers, if you're
Yeah.
looking for some people to do some dubbing, high quality work in other languages, the names are on the screen. You just got to reach out. You just got to reach out.
You know, I have a mic. I can do this from home.
You
Yes.
can, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. That mic is killing it. Your voice on that mic, gold.
That would be solid remote work.
I have a crappy
But,
mic. So.
But it still works. It doesn't matter. We can figure out how to make it work. We'll send you one, and then you'll have a cool one too, like
Perfect.
this. In the meantime, folks, thank you again for tuning into the first Warhirrim Wednesday. We're hoping to be here every week or every other week. If any news drops between now and the next video, we'll go over it, but we'll have set topics for each week going into the eventual release of the movie where everybody's going to go see it on night 1, and V is going to see it on night 1, 2, and 3, just to make sure that she doesn't miss out on the rewatchability that is the War of the Rohirrim. That's it for me. Appreciate you guys coming on, Strider. Again, always a pleasure to have you.
Always a pleasure, man. Always loved it.
Wikipedia, thank you for being able to bring up actors or voice actor names and who they're related to on the spot for us.
See, technology skills.
You're
Here
right.
for you.
ASMR, Nikki. Appreciate you being here.
Always a pleasure.
And Hen, happy Hen. Look, getting to talk about something that isn't anti that other Lord of the Rings project that's out, right?
I'm very glad that there are videos being made about this, i.e. ours. Besides us and I think Nerd of the Rings, it's impossible to find videos about this movie that aren't actually about the Rings of Power, and it wears
In
on you a
disguise.
little bit.
Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's why
Yep.
we're here. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very pleased to talk about it finally. Yeah.
If you want a place to talk in between now and then, again, you can read the article with all this latest and greatest news on our website, fellowshipoffans.com. And if you want to chat with us in between episodes, feel free to come on over to our public Discord server, which will have a link somewhere on the screen. I just want to say, even though there's no dwarves, really looking forward to this. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. See you next week.
See you.